to the context of philanthropy that I think is really exciting about using citizen panels and things to start to look at to the extent to which we have an overlap or not between where the money's going and where people would like it to go, at the front end, at the needs side.
Yeah, just to add on on that question, I think that's a really interesting one, and I think for us there's a lot of emphasis on using existing data and research that's out there. I think there's also a move now towards investing in some of that in the context of our country portfolio, so that we have that ongoing research around what the issues are. In some countries like Nepal, we've been piloting some work called a reality check, where it's really sort of a systematic spending time in communities, not focusing on one particular issue, but looking at sort of across the board what the issues are and having that inform all different sectors. Because I think one of the challenges that we have, and many organizations may have, is that the health people are looking at what the health issues are, the environment people are looking at the environment issues, and there is a need for an understanding more broadly. So I think that's kind of an area of work that we're looking at. But I think one area that we're keen to do more on is this co-designing component, which is really early on in the design process of big programs. Who do we need to have around the table, and kind of what are the fresh voices? So I think that's an area that we're definitely more interested in now.
Any other questions or comments from, yes, okay.
Jane Arnold from Charity Aid Foundation. You mentioned at the very beginning of the session technology, but we haven't talked about technology at all. And I'm just interested in people's experience using technology to gather customer feedback, or user feedback, beneficiary feedback, how you might want to term it. Particularly working in developing countries where you have very variable access sometimes to internet connection and technology needed.
So who would like to, do you want to talk about?
Sure. I think the technology issue is a big one. In the pilot work that we're doing with World Vision, one of the interesting findings, one of the approaches is using SMS technology, which is very popular. What we're finding there is that while it's more expensive than we anticipated. I think that's one of the lessons. Second is there are a lot more young men using technology than women, and kind of a broader range of ages. So that's another challenge there. And the third is we're realizing that people like mixed methods. So people like SMS technology. Some people like to talk to someone. Some people like a box that they can put their suggestions in. So we're finding that there's not that sort of the just using one approach may or may not work. And then if I can sort of speak to the work that David's doing in Zambia, there we're finding very simple things like government counterparts don't necessarily use their email, because often it's one computer shared by multiple people, and email accounts are only given to various persons in the organization, and it's a more formal approach to it. So there's definitely a lot of challenges around it, but there's also, I think, a lot of interest around it. And kind of on my list of things to do is we're working with our innovations team and DFID to look at, really to do a bit of a stock take on what kind of things are happening in the technology front. So I hope again in 6 months to have some more to say on that.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bright from Action Aid International. I just wanted to bring the kind of implementing partners view in here and just talk a bit about the kind of ownership of when you have collected the data and how you actually use that to make positive changes to the project. And having travelled quite a lot to see projects in action in quite rural areas, and seeing the really strong relationship between the partner organisations and the beneficiaries or the constituents, quite a lot of the time the project has been co-created to start with between those, between the constituents and between the partner. So when the feedback comes, if that is a participatory process, then I think the ownership should be shared with the communities or with the people who have benefited from those projects and implemented it. So it's not just going back up to management level for them to make those kind of top-down decisions, but for actually people who are actually involved in that to own that feedback, own their issues, and also say how that things can be changed to make improvements.
Something a bit over here.
My name's Emily.
And just bring that over.
Yeah.
It's for the recording.
Hi, my name is Emily from New Philanthropy Capital. And we are looking actually at the digital question right now. And what it is absolutely throwing up is this ability, particularly within well-defined communities of need. So, for example, cystic fibrosis, it's very clear, has it, doesn't, and they're already in those social networks. And that ability then to have a dialogue on the services and support that's needed within that community is working very well on that digital platform. So I think the big question and challenge is how do you take the lessons learned where you don't have a clear group, and you are looking for what else might be out there, how you use those digital platforms and how you potentially cross-pollinate that with platforms that people are using outside of their communities of need to be able to pull that out and have that discussion. And in a way, a lot of companies are already doing and looking for new markets and areas to go into. I think it could potentially answer some of those big questions that funders are looking at. But then it has to have that transparency and that honesty if it's going to be trusted. And just getting back to your original question, can you have a question like, would you recommend? I think the difficulty with a question like that is that you don't necessarily get the learning without the follow-up. And the motivations in the charitable sector for many recipients are not necessarily, or many beneficiaries are not necessarily by choice. And so it's a difficult one in that arena where you already have a dynamic and a power relationship that is so unequal that they may not, that they're already jaded by their experience accessing that service in the first place.
Anyone else from
Let me just make a quick follow-up on that. So that's right. And what I like to say at that point is that people who are in a situation where it's either that service or nothing, which need is also referred to in the development context, and therefore it shades their relationship, they're still making decisions, really important decisions about how, not whether. Well, whether first and then how to engage. And we can figure out, I believe, questions which will get at those decisions. It's different decisions from a consumer, but we can figure out a very small number, or at least it's our hypothesis, of questions that will get at that decision-making process. As we're doing with these ex-offenders in this program. And these guys are mandated to be there by the state to be in this program, so they don't have a choice. And yet we're starting to find ways to really reveal their experience and therefore help the organization and them have a better relationship. It is relational. Go back to your point.
Okay, I think if we don't have any more comments from the floor, I'm going to ask the two panellists to sum up, but I'm not going to ask them to exactly sum up. I'd like to present their vision for the future of the field. So just building on what we've been talking about where, okay, let's go forward 5 years and see constituent feedback as part of the whole world of monitoring, evaluation and collecting evidence to improve decision making. So who'd like to start?
Yeah.
Sure. I'll start and let David fill in all the good stuff. So, I mean, I think quite simply, I guess I see it more as, in 5 years from now, that it's part and parcel of what we do. It's considered a perfectly legitimate and rigorous question to be asked of everyone throughout the development supply chain of, how have beneficiaries been consulted, how have they added to this process, and really have that process be measured, have that be part of the decision making. So I think for me it's just part of management and part of the processes of organizations. And maybe kind of a second point related to this, and it was something I was thinking about on the train up here or down here. I'm based in Scotland, for if you couldn't tell from my accent, was around, I think there's also something about kind of a shift in professional views around this. I think there's a lot of interest now in all this, behavior change theory and behavioral economics, and I'd like to see how that's influencing development and philanthropy. And I think it's part of that larger shift around, what views do we value? How aware are we of our own biases? And I think it's part of all of that I'd like to see change in the way that we manage development and philanthropy. The other thing I am quite interested in seeing is the number of business professionals, people with MBAs, people who are coming from a business background, getting more involved in philanthropy and development, and the way this type of thinking is just common sense. My partner is in business, and when I was telling him what I was doing, he was just sort of a bit baffled, sort of saying, well, how is that not part and parcel of what everyone does? How do you run a business without knowing what your customers think of you? So I like that sort of, of course, approach to this kind of work be kind of what we're talking about 5-10 years from now.
David.
Great. So the way I see it, we're in the early days of the emergence of a new practice. We're building craft, and this conversation, I think, has usefully surfaced a lot of the challenges. I think every problem around the doing of constituent voice that's come up today is a solvable problem at an affordable level. It's just a question of us bearing down and figuring it out and making it happen. When I think about that, I think there's two pieces. One is systematic. It has to be a systematic, continuous, light touch, real-time process. If it's not that, it's not going to work, and that solves so many of the issues that have come up. And that's what's been missing in the past. So let's take the level of feedback from grantees to foundations. In 5 years, I would expect to see a well-developed benchmark data set so that thousands of foundations across the world could compare themselves against each other in terms of how their beneficiaries